call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. McCausland, can you please call roll?
Mrs. Feiss.
Here.
Mr. Grisbeck.
Here.
Mrs. Hoppy.
Here.
Mrs. Janasek.
Here.
Mr. McGregor.
Here.
Mr. Modrak.
Here.
Mr. Scalzo.
Here.
Mrs. Turner.
Here.
Mr. Christensen.
Here.
All 9 members present.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda for business items?
So moved.
Motion is made by Mr. Scalzo, seconded by Mrs. Turner.
Voting is open. Thank you.
Mr. McCausland, we have no power at that source.
I'm good. I got
Mrs. Hoppy. Motion carries.
Thank you. Are there any comments on agenda items? Not in the room. Any public comments online?
Hold on 1 second. No callers.
Okay, thank you. So with this meeting, for anybody who is online watching, this is our reorganization meeting. And so we're going to go through a series of steps here to first appoint a president pro temp or temporary president while we go through and elect the president and vice president positions for the next calendar year. So as a first action, I'd like to open up nominations for a president pro temp.
I nominate Jim Modrak.
second.
Anybody else interested in? Any other nominations? Okay, let's close those nominations and vote on Jim Modrak as president pro temp.
I'll have to adjust the content in your, but
Sure.
at this point. Okay, voting is open.
So yes for me, Mr. McCausland?
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Pass the gavel to Mr. Modrak.
Okay, folks, at this time, we'll take nominations for President of the School Directors of Bethel Park. Will there be any nominations?
I would like to nominate Barry Christensen for School Board President.
We have nomination of Barry Christensen by Mr. Scalzo, second by Mr. McGregor. Are there any other nominations at this time? With that being said, we will close the nominations, and at this time, we will vote on Mr. Barry Christensen as President of the Bethel Park School Board. Mr. McCauley?
Getting there. A lot happening. Okay, voting is open. Thank you. Motion carries.
Ms. Gary. At this time, we will vote for the Vice President of the School Board at Bethel Park.
Nominations.
Any nominations?
I would like to nominate Kim Turner as School Board Vice President.
Is there a second? Kim Walsh Turner has been nominated as Vice President by Mr. Scalzo, second by Mr. Hoppy. Are they in? Ms. Hoppy. Sorry. Are there any other nominations at this time? Not hearing at this time, we will close the nominations. And at this time, Mr. McCausland, we will vote on this.
Voting is open.
It's a yes for me, Mr. McCausland.
Thank you. Motion carries.
That being said, my time is done.
Well, sir.
Costanza, I'm living on top.
Thank you all for, I guess, the confidence. So I guess I didn't screw up my first year too bad. So. But thank you. And I guess, you know, not to get too soppy, but I have enjoyed working with all of you this last year. We've had a good team, a lot of good debate, and made a lot of progress. So thank you. And along with this, this vote comes a 50% salary increase, right? Still zero. Okay, but thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to the Finance Committee, Mr. Grisbeck, can you take the one item under there?
Yes, I can. We have one item tonight under the Finance Committee agenda. It is the approval of the reappointment of the Bethel Park School District Solicitor. The Board of School Directors reappoints Weiss Burkhart Kramer LLC as School District Solicitor to provide all solicitor services, including delinquent tax collection and tax assessment matters, effective in 2023 at a $750 monthly retainer fee and $155 hourly billing rate. I move to approve this item.
Motion was made by Mr. Grisbeck, seconded by Mrs. Turner.
Voting is open.
Yes for me.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Much appreciated.
Ms. Janicek, can you please take the three items under other?
Under Other tonight, we have 3 items. Naming of newspapers for advertising. The Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve the following Allegheny County newspapers as mandated. A, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. B, Observer Reporter. C, The Almanac. Number 2, notice of monthly board meetings. And number 3, appointment of representatives. Do we need to take these separately?
Yes.
So I move number 1, naming of newspapers for advertising.
Second?
I did have a comment on that item, or I guess initially a question. Dr. Walsh, could you talk about that item just a little bit? I guess why we have it on here, what it accomplishes.
So the school district, as a public institution and a taxing body, has obligated by Pennsylvania code to advertise their meetings, advertise for bids, et cetera. And so the school board has to identify in advance the publications that we would officially use, so those that would want to be seeking out our publications would know where to go. So we have historically identified these 3 as the most local and have the best circulation for the purposes of advertising our meetings, advertising our financial actions, et cetera, that are required by Pennsylvania code, Post-Gazette, the Observer Reporter, and the Almanac.
Okay. And would you be in agreement to say that we probably don't get many people that attend our meetings as a result of these postings, and they're primarily to, I guess, serve the Pennsylvania requirement?
I would agree. I think that our website and our social media probably generate more attention to the action of the board. The only part I couldn't account for would be bidders. If we're advertising for bids on supplies, for instance, et cetera, that how much attention each of these generates versus the others. I don't know that one, but I know I would agree with you on the point of meeting attendance and advertising on the meetings of the board.
Okay. And then this may be a better question for Ms. Turnbull, but we only have to have, my understanding of the statute is we only have to have one newspaper of record, right? We don't have to have three. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So as some of you may know, may not know, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette staff is currently on strike as a result of having their health care removed. So as such, I move to amend the motion on the floor to remove the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. As such, the motion would then read, the Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve the following Allegheny County newspapers as mandated in Bethel Park School District's Policy 6, A, Observer Reporter, B, the Almanac.
Is there a second on the amendment?
A second.
So just some discussion on that. I mean, I'll just share my point of view. I don't expect this strike to go on forever.
Agreed.
I mean, are you
Yep.
saying that once it's over, then we would post?
My personal opinion, obviously I can only speak for myself, but my personal opinion would be to add it back on once the strike is over. But again, that's just me. Obviously, all of you would have your own personal opinions on that item. But I think just kind of aside of that item and the strike, I think I don't know for sure if we're always just posting in one, but I would say that posting in multiple publications doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense from a fiscal perspective. Talking to Ms. Turnbull earlier, I believe you said it could be up to $500 or $600 for each posting, so that obviously starts to add up. I don't know what our current practice is exactly, if we are just posting in one or if we're posting in multiple, but the intent of my motion is to remove the Post-Gazette for the duration of the strike until the strike terms are met.
Did you want me to add something to that? I mean, as far as bids go, we don't advertise a lot of bids. We tend to use a lot of state contracted bids that are already out there to avoid the bidding process. We probably use it more for HR for advertising open positions. We don't do a lot of bidding of supplies anymore. We might do it with the AIU as a joint purchasing board, but we don't do it as a district, and we use more online resources now than we have in the past. So we try to avoid that at all costs. And when we do RFPs for professional services, we're not required to put those in the paper. Those are by invitation only. So we don't use it a lot in the business office other than for the mandated things for posting budget and those types of
Things
items.
like that,
Yeah, that are required by the school code.
Can I just ask what the point is? Like, do we have to use them if they're listed? So can't we just leave them and who cares? We'll use them if we want, we won't if we don't? Or do we have to, rather than like putting them back on when they go off strike? I guess I don't understand what the,
Yeah, I mean, if we had a guarantee from the administration, that would satisfy my desire, but I mean, that's not, I don't know if that's something that the administration would be comfortable with, and I don't have the authority to direct that, right? I can't tell Dr. Walsh that, or Mr.
I have no
Cotton.
objection to leaving them on and not using them, only using them when we absolutely have to. There are times when some of the publications can't get your ad in. There's a certain time cycle by when you have to post the ad in order to get it in. So probably of the three, the Post-Gazette is a little more flexible with that. But I don't have an issue using them only when we absolutely have to.
That would satisfy my desire of the motion, if you all would prefer that as opposed to taking them off and then re-adding them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. I mean, I think all of this is kind of a colonial era rule.
Agreed.
Okay, that it's really ineffective.
Right, and that's kind of the nature of my motion, right? I mean, if what we're largely doing is just giving money to these newspapers, I don't personally want to support a newspaper that has its employees on strike because they remove their health care. But again, that's my personal opinion.
I do know, Mr. Christensen, that when we did the policy review 2 years ago, when most of us, when past President Dobas had asked for that, it had not changed at the state level. So that is why that is still the reason it is. The state level has not changed that.
There is
Right.
continued discussion with the
Correct.
legislature right now, more recently, that they want to eliminate that requirement.
There is, but it's still,
It still hasn't happened, yes.
so just some background on that and why that policy is still in its current state.
Sure, okay. Okay, so since the motion was made, or the motion, the amendment to the motion was made and seconded, we should at least vote on it, and then, or you can rescind, I guess.
You could amend the amendment, yes, that is a
Now we gotta
possibility.
vote 3 times.
I won't be rescinding it, because I still agree with the
Okay.
nature of it, but also, like I said, I would be perfectly okay if we, just deprioritize the Post-Gazette as well.
Yeah, okay. We're going to vote on the motion to amend to strike Pittsburgh Post-Gazette.
So if you voted against the motion, all it would do is it would kick it back to the initial item, and then we would be voting on the 3 together. If you voted for the amendment, then after we voted for the amendment, we'd just be voting on the item with the 2 observer report and almanac there.
Right.
So we'll take a vote on the amendment.
The amendment. The amendment.
And we're also getting
That
a
voting,
utility refresher. in
that
November
voting is
as a result.
open.
Mr. McCausland, abstain me, please.
You're going to abstain. Okay, the motion carries 5-3 with 1 abstention.
Okay. So the motion on the table now is that we move to adopt Observer Reporter and the Almanac as a way for, as the newspapers for advertising. So that's the motion that's on the floor right now. So any discussion on that? Okay. We can vote on the main motion then?
Voting is open.
So yes for me.
Motion carries 8-1.
Okay.
All right.
That was a good exercise in parliamentary procedure. Good job, team.
That was the real goal,
That was why you did it, right?
It's all about Robert's rules. That was it.
All right. Under other, item 2, the Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to adopt the January 2023 through December 2023 meeting dates as attached in the PDF.
A second? So the motion was made by Ms. Janusik, seconded by Ms. Turner. Any discussion? Any
So this is a little
discussion
different.
besides Buffy's?
Yeah. This is a little different than what you approved last year because we added all of the facility meetings. So this actually schedules you 3 times a month. And, well, we probably should have talked about that as a board, whether you want to continue the practice of having facilities committee meeting separate from the other committee of the whole, separate from the regular business meeting. I think it was in the, June, March, April time when we were getting a ton of conversation about process and the feasibility study and buildings and so forth that we felt like it was taking away from the other meetings. But we're getting to a point now, for instance, where it's getting down to a more streamlined piece, and it's possible if the board's amenable to strike all the facility meetings and just move it to committee meetings, knowing that you're going to have guests at the committee meeting to present on whatever architectural piece or construction piece that's relevant at that time. I'm not sure. I think that when you think back to all of the debates and discussion that we were having, we really did take time away. But the more recent one, facilities committee meetings, you're hearing from DRAW. They're 15 minutes. They're done. This time next year, you're not even going to have an IMS project to be dealing with. So I don't know that. I'm not sure it's going to be necessarily its own full meeting night out for you. I think I believe you'll get to a point where you're comfortable Maybe we leave it for 6 months, but I don't know that you're going to need to have 3 nights out, 3 meetings a month just because of the construction project, because the updates are really succinct at that point. Once we break ground, it's what's happening, getting some pictures of what's happening. It's really not much debate and discussion.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds, I mean, I think it sounds fine if we get started like this, and if we decide partway through the year that we don't need them anymore. But,
So we'll just leave the dates as they are. We'll review the 6-month period, like you said, then probably at that time we'll have a better feel for everything, and we can just
Yeah.
re-motion it, so.
And I would say if, this does, increase the number of meetings by 50% than what, people signed up for originally. So if you need to prioritize, I would say, prioritize the committee and voting meetings over the facilities meeting.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
So, okay.
Okay.
So as is.
Great. Any other comments on that? No?
Voting is open.
So yes, Mr. Collison.
Thank you. Motion carries.
All right. Item 3 is appointment of representatives and alternates to the following organizations: Pathfinder, Steel Center, Shazda, PSBA, Municipal Council, Parks, Rec, and Leisure, as well as the Shade Tree Commission, and PTO, PTA. But I'm not sure I can actually make a motion without the people yet.
I was just going to say
So-
that. There's nothing actually to move.
Back to you.
Well, let me just go through what, as I recall, Jim, you're doing Pathfinders today. Gail, you're doing Steel Center. Shazda, was that you?
It was me.
That was you, okay.
I'd like to
Vince?
continue that if possible.
Sure, okay. Sharon, you're doing PSBA and Municipal Council?
I haven't actually been asked to do anything for municipal council as a liaison, but I'm
That's fine, you hear things.
Dan. But yes, I'm more than happy to officially do something in that role, yes.
Okay. I was doing the parks, and Kim, you're doing PTO, PTA? Okay. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes, sir.
Anybody want to make changes? No?
Are you
Okay.
shade tree as well, Barry? Or do we have shade tree?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I didn't realize they were separate. I was doing Park and Recs, not Shade Tree.
Well,
So
it
that might
was,
be a gap.
when Mrs. Dobos was the liaison, she would go to the Shade Tree Commission meetings. And so last year, we only appointed Parks and Rec. We forgot Shade Tree. But I think you actually were at the Shade Tree event
Yeah.
at Miners Park. So, yeah, it ends up being the same. For us, it has been the same person doing
Okay.
both.
Okay. So with the list I just read, everybody knows who you are and what you're assigned to. You can make that motion.
Do you want me to go through the names? Or just
I don't know. I don't think you need a motion on this, do you?
I think
That's-
It just says it's for discussion.
For PSBA, Steel Center, at least those two we do as a formality of having a motion is.
Yeah,
It has to
Pathfinder.
be a motion and a
Yeah,
vote.
Pathfinder's
fine.
we spend money.
Let's do them all.
Although you can, someone could present a slate of candidates to fill all of those with one motion if you wish.
All right.
So do you want me to read those off and then you say I move that?
I
Okay.
think I got it.
Okay, okay, good. I
Correct
just-
me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
It's like a memory test. All right. I move that the board appoints as a representative to Pathfinder, Mr. Modrak, to Steel Center, Mrs. Hoppy, to Shazda, Mr. Scalzo, to PSBA, Mrs. Janisic, to Municipal Council, Mrs. Janisic, to Parks, Rec, and Leisure and Shade Tree, Mr. Christensen, and to PTO, PTA, was that Mrs. Hoppy?
No, it's Mrs. Walsh.
Mrs. Walsh Turner.
Second.
So a motion is made by Ms. Janusik, seconded by Mr. Grisbeck.
I do not have this set up, or it was not set up as an action item. So you're either going to have to do a voice vote or all in favor, whichever you wish.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so now, I don't think we actually have to adjourn. We can just move into the agenda then for the facilities meeting? We have to go through
Yeah.
adjournment and,
I think we
Everything.
could adjourn the voting, the reorganization meeting, adjourn to the facilities meeting, which is,
okay. All in favor of adjourning from the reorganization meeting to the facilities meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's exit in board docs then to the facilities and services meeting. So nobody's left, so we don't need to do roll call. First item on the agenda, we're going to see a presentation from our auditor, Cipher and Cipher. It's important for Draw Collective to hear this, so they know how much money we have to spend.
Or not.
Or not.
Here's
What'd you say?
I got a stove today. I know you. I got a stove. I know you guys have a little bit more money. That's all I got. I bought 2 refrigerators. I got a stove.
I think one of the draw people are going to be on the engineer is going to present some stuff tonight, just so we don't forget about them. Thanks, Luke. Thank you.
Evening, board members. Thank you all for inviting us here tonight. I'm Steve Cipher, partner of Cipher and Cipher. I have with me one of my partners, Luke Rail. Luke and his team did the audit work here this year. We've given you 3 things: a copy of the management letter, a draft of the financial statement, and the presentation, which is also on the board behind me, in front of me. You're welcome to follow along on the paper or on the big screen. As you know, the Pennsylvania School Code requires an annual audit of the district financials. In this case, it's the year ended June 30th, 2022. The important thing for the board to keep in mind is that everything in the audit report is the responsibility of your superintendent and your business manager. Our responsibility is to the school board, indirectly the public. We work for you. We're expected to use U.S. government auditing standards to conduct an audit. The conclusion of every audit is an opinion from us telling you whether your financial statements represent where you were at June 30th and how you got there. If you look at the bottom of page 2, the auditor's opinion is unmodified. That's exactly what you'd expect to see. Anything less than that's pretty much a catastrophe, no matter what organization we'd be talking about. Second thing that we do, part of the audit, is called a single audit. This is required of all political subdivisions in the United States, some nonprofits, some companies, which receive more than $750,000 of federal money to have a single audit. In our case, we're a bit over $4 million here of federal funding. We take an additional look at internal control and your compliance with laws and regulations at the financial statement level, and then we also audit the federal program. And in this case, this year, proving to be a difficult task, because there are many new programs that came about as a result of COVID. Now, those will all be gone within 2 to 3 years. Hopefully, we'll be back to normal in that regard. Fund level statements, we'll start with the general fund. This past year, we brought in some $92,051,000. We spent more than that, $93,957,000, such that the fund balance last year went down by $1,609,000. The net change in the fund balance, once you factor in borrowing, refunds that you had to give for tax appeals and so forth, the net loss was $1,389,000. The total fund balance stands in at approximately $23.8 million. The unassigned number is what the board should be focusing on. This is what is not committed for any type of a specific purpose at the moment. That's $5,569,000. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Capital Projects Fund, total revenues of $61 million, expenditures of $6 million, but the other financing number, $42,135,000. As you know, you had a very large bond issue. The net of the Capital Project Fund activity, up $36 million, stands in at $45.8 million at the end of the year. History lessons on page 5. As we mentioned, the district, through the actions of your administration and the board, have set aside reserves out of your general fund balance. And what you can see is that the fund balance has fallen in a fairly tight range between $21 million and a high last year of probably slightly over $25 million. If you notice the last column on the right-hand side, the fund balance is lower by that $1,389,000 that we talked about. The various commitments, retirement and PISA, capital projects, a wide variety of other things, but again, your unassigned is $5,569,000. Whenever we go to page 6, the question that comes up from a lot of board members is, well, how much should my fund balance be? The really easy answer to that is there are only 9 people in Bethel Park School District that know the right answer to that. School director, you get to raise your own taxes. Has to be a daunting task. But we can offer recommendation. You have approximately a $93 million budget, perhaps 94 this year. 3%, 5%, and 8% of that number are the reserves that you need to properly function. And to put it in real life terms, every one of you runs your own school district at home. It's called your household. Well, you know how much money you make, and you know how much money you make, you know how much money you need to put aside for kids' education, the new couch we want, whatever. We're doing the same thing here, but on a much bigger scale. The 2 things I'd like you to look at is the blue bar that sits on the left. That was last year's unassigned fund balance. You can see it was just at $6 million. That number has gone down this year. As I said, it stands at $5,569,000. But when you draw that line across, we're right above the mid-level 5%, but we're not quite to the 8% that the state would allow us to have. I've said it before, I don't think it's possible to have too much in reserve. And the last 3 years of COVID, stock market difficulties and so forth sort of prove the point that you never know what's coming at you. And so you need to make sure you're fiscally solvent and protected carefully. We'll go to the next page.
But I guess to the, maybe the question you asked before around how much should we have, there is a limit. 8% is kind of the state guidelines for the maximum.
Right, for our size of a school district, yeah. So that number would be, we'll go back that one page, Lou.
I mean, right now, we're like
would be close
6.5%.
to an $8 million fund balance. And I truthfully think if the state would have it its way, no one would have a fund balance. But for now, that's not the case. So when we look at your most important financial decision of the year, that's when you pass your budget. Last year, revenues were almost $1 million under budgeted revenues. The biggest under budget was in-state revenue. That was under by approximately $1 million, but again, a lot of uncertainties there. We were over in tax revenue, and that's a good thing. The 24 school districts that we audit, a lot of them fell short in their tax revenue. And we're not sure why that is exactly, but it's certainly not a good trend. And it's been going on for a couple of years now. That we've collected more than we anticipated in taxes is a good thing. It means we're hitting the budget and then some. When we look at expenditures, budget 93 million and some change, we hit that budget within $14,000. I don't think I can tell you another district that ever hit it this close. Compliment to
Good
you,
job,
Mr.
Mr. McCausland.
When we take a look at page 8, I like history lesson. What you're seeing here is budget revenue versus actual. The orange color is the budget revenue. Maybe not quite orange, but the blue color is the actual. But what you can see here is that in every case of the last 5 years, 4 years of those, the budget exceeded, the revenues actual exceeded the budget. This is the first year in 5 years that that's gone the other way. And again, it's mostly in state revenues. That was about $1 million short there. When we take a look at page 9, similar chart for expenditure. As we mentioned, you hit the budget, a $93.9 million budget within $14,000. We've had some surpluses in the past several years where we spent less than we thought we would. It could be that we were simply over budgeting. And truthfully, folks, if you plan properly, a budget should normally come in exactly the way you expect it to. It's not typical that we would need to hire 100 new teachers. We don't have those kinds of variances in our day-to-day event. So that's why your budget here, it's not surprising. It should be close. When we go to page 10, we're going to talk about the management letter. Luke's going to do some of this. Luke, do you want to take this part over?
Yeah, the fund balance there, Steve already mentioned a good bit of what talking about there. It did go down around $1.4 million from the prior year, still ended up, the unassigned is about $5.5 million. I won't go through that again. Cafeteria fund is on page 2 of the management letter you have in front of you. What that does is gives you a 5-year history of the profit and loss in the cafeteria fund itself. You'll note that the prior 4 years were all deficits. The current year's profit. The main difference is regulations in the current year. All students ate for free. We're seeing profits in nearly all the cafeterias that we're seeing this year. Don't expect that to continue most likely. So we want to keep an eye on that going forward as the general fund will have to support ongoing losses when the time continues. GASB 68 and GASB 75, that's on page 3 of the management letter you have there. 75 relates to our promises and our contracts for retiree health insurance. We recorded a liability of some $27 million this year. It was around 24 in the prior, so it's gone up some. Things that change this are contract promises, seniority of staff, various items. So that's an item to keep an eye on. 68 is our share of the PSERS unfunded liability. Our number comes in at just under $120 million. It's basically our district's share as a percentage of the total PSERS liability in the state. That will be recorded on our government-wide statements. Lastly, GASB 96, it's on page 4. That's a pending pronouncement. In the current year, we're implementing a lease standard where leases that were previously operating leases are now intangible assets and liabilities on our balance sheet. Well, next year, that's going to extend to software leases, things like that. educational software, anything going forward will be an intangible asset and a liability. Administration's already taken steps to move forward with implementing that in the 22-23 year.
The next two pages, pages 11 and 12, we review this annually with the districts that we audit. For 22-23, the PESU's contribution liability as a percentage of payroll, 35.26%. That's up from 34.94. The probably good thing about that is that it represents a small increase. The performance of the market, the fact that we think they're running PESUs better than they were before, has helped that cause, but we'll have to wait and see as time goes on. When you look at page 12, this gives you an overall feel for how we got to this point. There are three lines to pay attention to. The blue line represents the funding percentage, meaning that the promises made in PESU versus the assets available to pay those promises. As you can see, the funding percentage is just a hair over 60%. When you take a look at the green line by ERISA standards is an endangered pension plan. So we're solid 20% underneath what would be considered an endangered plan. The good part is the climb on the roller coaster, which is the red line at the bottom, represents the dramatic increases in the cost of the district. But what you can see is it's been fairly steady. It rises slowly, but we can only hope that it's going to continue this way. And as you know, this past year, I believe, was it 2021, was the first year of the new PESUs covering brand new employees. The defined benefit program has gone aside. It's still in effect for those who have been with the district and will not go away for decades to come. But anything new, the cost will be controlled a little bit better. The conclusion, folks, Bethel Park School District.
Those
Oh, I'm sorry.
projections,
Yeah.
do you have a feel for the investment mix that the PESERS fund has? And mostly from the standpoint of how volatile is it? You know, we've seen over the last 6-7 years a pretty steady climb in stock performance. And is that the correlation we're seeing here? And so if we saw an economic downturn, would we expect that the slope of that curve to change? And
I would say that's helped. But the interesting thing, we do quite a number of Taft-Hartley plans. Those are unions. Mm-hmm. And so if you have a good year in the market, they don't offer up all that at one time. They take that dramatic increase and divide it into 10, sometimes 20, sometimes 30, and they factor the goodness in over a long period of time. The same token, they do the same thing with the drops in the market.
Okay, so you insulate a little bit from the
It's
market
kind of like
performance.
smoothing the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
I don't know why we can't just tell it like it is, but then I don't write those rules.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of wish I did at times. Bethel Park's always been a district that's watched its numbers. You need to continue to do that. The job that you have in school districts will not get any, school directors will not get any easier. It's, you know, we don't know what comes. The last few years have proven that. But you've got a good fund balance, unreserved, the undesignated number, $5,569,000, stands in the mid-range of recommendation. Would we like it to be 8%? Sure. But that's something that you all can plan for as you do your budgets. So if any of you have questions, we're happy to answer those. If not, we'd like to thank Dr. Walsh, Mr. McCausland, and Sharon Copey The audit goes very smoothly here. The board should be super pleased with that. And a final thanks is I appreciate the opportunity to be your auditor. Thank you all.
Thank you. Any other questions on it? No? Okay, thank you both for coming here. Are there any public comments on the agenda items for the meeting tonight? Any online?
No calls online.
Okay, very good. So first item on the agenda is the Facilities and Service Committee. So Mr. Modrak, can you?
Yes, sir.
On this?
Tonight, we have 3 items on discussion. We are looking at presentation from Draw Collective. Second would be discussion item and scheduling community meetings. And the third will be the naming of the new K-5 elementary project. So at this time, I see that we have our representatives from Draw. They'll come up and give us an update of where we're at with the new elementary center. Thank you.
Good evening. Glad to be here. We'll have some fun. I like nights like tonight, and a little bit of technical, so it won't be all fun. But yeah, it never is. So a little bit of interior concepts for the building. You can see I have a couple of our best talented folks here, Kayla and Daniel. They get the credit for most of the things that you're going to see today. Super talented designs that they've been creating. So we're going to start out with the interior portions. And just as you've seen some of our buildings before, and every one are unique to each district that we work in. And one of the things that we try to do really hard is spend some time with the staff before we start deciding what the building might look like. We've spent a lot of time with the administration. We spent quite a bit of time with teachers. Through that conversation, usually what we're trying to do is learn a little bit about what some of the emphasis are in education within a particular building that we might be creating. In this particular case, we have the grade level groupings that we have at the K-5 level. And also, the fun part about elementaries is you can be a little bit more thematic about them. And one of the things that we all have to remind ourselves is that it is primarily for the students, little people. And so we try to make things a little bit fun at this age group, and but also at the same time throw in some opportunities so that the building could present a background for the kinds of educational things, learning that are being done on this campus in particular. And at the same time, we looked at a little bit of the district and what we kind of saw as an opportunity to bring everyone together and to sort of rally around something that is educationally important to this grade grouping, but also maybe relates to Bethel Park in particular, and maybe will help you name the building. We'll see here. You saw Daniel's exteriors. These are preliminary and are subject to change a little bit, but you got a sense for what is going on the outside of the building. Glass, stone, some natural colors. When we're talking about early on planning the building, there's a lot of discussion about, well, how do we organize the building, and then how can that organization lend itself to some kind of a three-dimensional organization also. And for us, it's important to have a concept so that we can make decisions, because just as a simple example, if I asked you what color should we paint this ceiling, we would probably have 9 or 10 different color choices that people would randomly say, oh, well, I think, tan goes with brick, or I like gray with brick. And, well, I hate to say it, but we do the same thing in our office. Kayla and Dan and myself would all have differing opinions as to what it would be. And so we like to create a decision tree, which is essentially to try to create a theme that helps us eliminate many choices and create a funnel so we can actually make good choices and go in some direction. And so this is a sketch that we had put together that, if I do it this way because everyone can see. This is a concept sketch for the building itself. And what you see through here is when we first started talking, you remember we were talking about something called the Main Street, sort of an ordering factor. We changed that in our concept to the park pathway. Still a Main Street sort of format, but the concept essentially has been that we, along a major pathway that goes through the building, in this particular slide, the southern portion are the more public spaces. Those are things like the cafeteria and the gymnasiums and the large group instruction kind of things. So the things that, moms and dads are going to come in the building, they'll be on that side of the building in the evening time. And then we have a separate side of the building, which is, I term private, which are the classroom wings or neighborhoods. We have, of course, a layer cake here with 3 levels. And so each grade level has its own neighborhood. And so off the park pathway, one of the things that we're trying to do is create a scenario where we have a concept that's strong in wayfinding. And so usually we start with color. In that, I think that's the easiest way to wayfind for most people, especially if you make the colors distinct enough from each other. One of the things we learned in working with the teachers is that oftentimes at the elementary school, they like to do field days and things like that where each one of the kids has their own color shirts. And we thought, well, what a great idea. We could make each grade level in this building a different color. And so that would help us in wayfinding. So as we get off of the park pathway and head into our classroom neighborhoods, if you're going into third grade would have a theme or a color to it, and so on and so forth with each one of the grades. And so as you're along the park path, you can see the gateway going into each one of those neighborhoods, and then it would be a different color. So initially, you've got that, and then possibly we'll have some naming conventions for each grade level grouping that could be a little bit more relatable to and interesting for the kids. So along the park path also, there's a lot of STEAM activities in the building. We have the stream center, we have the art rooms, we have the media center, and we have learning locations. We have learning stairs and things like that where we gather as groups. And we also have a lot of student display. This is where we're really getting a chance to show off, not only from grade level to grade level for the kids, but also for moms and dads when they're coming into the building. And so it really becomes a little bit of a not just an art show, but it could be technology show, all sorts of things that are going on. But it expresses a lot of what's going on inside the building. As a part of this Park Path organization and our ecological theme, we said, well, starting off with the Park Path, let's make the whole building sort of as if the children are part of going to the park. And who goes to the park? Hikers, climbers, those kinds of things. And so we could actually maybe identify each one of the grade level groupings as that kind of nomenclature, but it could be anything. And along the park path, to help us with colors and differentiation, we have a sunset portion that is over in one of the learning stair areas, and then we have a sunrise side, and then we have a night sky in the center that is around the stream area. And so what do those mean? Well, they mean color variations, essentially, because the makeup of the spaces are relatively similar from a constructability point of view. One of the things that we do at our company, we use ordinary materials in unique ways. So we try to be economic about the cost of things. Paint is not that expensive, and paint from one color to another, you're still painting a wall, but you paint one wall orange and one wall red, there's a difference. Relatively simple, you didn't pay anything for that. So I like to think like that. We have things like acoustical panels, we know we need them, and so we put them together and cluster them and make them creative, and so You'll see some of those images with that. So in each one of these areas, in working with the teachers and thinking about an ecological theme, along with being in the park and how do they teach, there's quite a bit of conversation about learning about the forest, the lower portion of the forest, the middle portion of the forest, the tree canopy, and things like that. We were looking at a way to try to manage daylight in the building and bring daylight into these central spaces. And so we've used a concept called dapple light, which is essentially as the light comes through the trees, through the leaves and through the branches, that's called dappled light. And so that gives us an opportunity to do something interesting and try to reflect that in the design. So I'll skip ahead.
I just want to say that approach to showing the layout, it's neat. It's kind of the emotional view rather than just square corners and straight lines. It's more the emotional element to it. So it's a creative way to lay that out.
Thank you. And I think my next slide, look, boxes.
Right, yeah. This is how you would build it, okay? But, kind of how things fit together, the emotional side of it, that was
Exactly.
kinda neat how that came out in the other. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really don't think in the boxes, which is kind of funny. We do floor plans that are very rigid in Central. I mean, we're trying to be efficient and things like that and make space appropriate. But three-dimensionally, it does not have to be a box. It can have some curves. At this grade level, we want some movement. We want some soft edges and things like that. We don't want everything to be hard. And so you can do that within a box footprint. So we have a normal steel structure, but we'll play a little bit with the ceiling and things like that. So in this box plan, in the actual floor plan that's related to the sketch there, just as to get you thinking about what we're going to be looking at from view to view, this is our park pathway here, which starts at the front of the building, which is over here on the right, that faces the Kings Chapel Road. And we come across through here. Here's the gateway going into, this happens to be second grade, and this is the gateway going into third grade. And so you could kind of say, well, we've got the park pathway, the main path, main gathering spaces where we come together, and then you're taking a side trail to go off into second grade or another side trail to go off into third grade, sort of thing like that. And then within each one of those grade level groupings, we have houses. There are 3 houses. Here's 1, here's 2, and then here's 3. There are small gathering spaces in each house that the classrooms come together in and they share. Inside those spaces, we'll take a little bit of a hint of what's going on the park pathway and bring it into those spaces so there's a connection. We'll do it with color. We'll do it a little bit with the ceiling and lights. And then other trails, one of the things that we wanted to show in this image is that we have connections along the park path to the outdoors, either visually or actually physically. At this level, this is visually because we're up 1 floor from the grade, but down below, it's a direct access to the outdoor play area. Here, direct access visually, but also down below, direct access to an ecological center that we're creating in the courtyard area. And then the other direction is through the cafeteria space and to this outside. So, I mentioned a little bit about naming conventions and things like that. So what we did is, the colors don't show up very well on the projected image. Oops, I'm sorry. But on your screen on the computer, they really pop a little bit. So here are 6 grade levels, which we just termed bird watchers, hikers, campers, climbers, hikers, and foragers, or bikers and foragers. And we signed a color to them. And then along the park pathway, we said, okay, we're trying to sort of describe a day in the park. We have our sunrise and we have colors. We're also trying to get some of the Bethel Park orange into the building and be consistent. I'd like to see that throughout the building, but not in a way that looks like it's a sports team or anything like that. But it means something to you, and frankly, I think we can tie in with the concept pretty easily. And so we have sunset colors. So when you are along the pathway, you'll have one side that is the sunrise and more orangey and yellow, and the other side that is a sunset that is more pinks and purples. And then in the middle, we have the Starry Night, which is actually a really interesting space where the stream is, where we're trying to bring everything down, make a separation from one side to the other a little bit, going from a big, tall space down to smaller space, go through something, and then come up the other side. It's more interesting, keeps the building quieter, but also gives us an opportunity to display and do it in a little bit different way, and maybe a little bit more of a high-tech way. I mentioned the color, sunrise, sunset. Actually, I've been taking some fantastic pictures out of my office lately. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but the sunsets have been just amazing. And I'm sending them to Kayla, and she's picking colors. Really great. So I mentioned dappled light earlier. So when we were working with the media center folks, and we were explaining the concept of where we were heading, and they got all excited, and they came up with the tree canopy, the forest canopy, the forest understory, and the forest floor. They're like, we teach this. And at each level of grade grouping, it's a little bit different kind of conversation. You know, one could be much more technical, and then another one could be much more playful, depending upon the age group. And so on the upper floor, so we have our middle floor is our main level where you come in at, but when we have an upper floor from there, in that upper floor is where we have the tree canopy. So we actually have a skylight in each of those learning stair opportunities. There's a skylight. We'll have the dappled light come down through some panels. And Dan has come up with a really nice way of showing the rays of the sun on the wall in paint, which looks as a backdrop to the learning stairs, which is really nice. And then when we get to the middle floor, it will be more like the central portion of the forest, where we're seeing trees or representations of trees. In some cases, we're actually recommending that we put some graphics. We actually do some murals that are representative, and to be a little bit literal. And then along with those things, we'll talk a little bit about some of the inhabitants of these places. And then the forest floor would be at the ground level, which is manifests itself kind of in a fun way. So if you look at some of the things in the canopy area, we've got flora and we've got fauna. We've got the hawk as a good example of something that's up in the sky or up in the tree canopy, squirrels and things like that. In the mid-level, in that forest understory, we've got things like rabbits and deer, which Kayla almost hit one with her car on the way in today. And then certain flowering plants and things of that nature. And then at the forest floor, we've got other things like mushrooms and ferns and mosses and things that you see when you take a hike through the forest or through the park. And also, a lot of this process represents the cycle of life. You've got producers and you've got consumers and you've got recyclers. That's also part of your educational format that's going on in the building. And so what we're trying to do is help the staff with some of those concepts. And then so when you're walking through the building, you'll be able to see some of it, and then it'll be representative. And so how do we do some of this? Well, relatively simply. And I'll explain a little bit as we go ahead, but in some cases, it'll just be like a sticker on a piece of glass that'll have a graphic that'll be on the sticker. So it's relatively simple. It maybe doesn't have to be actually permanent for 50 years. It could be something that it changes over time. The glass can stay, but maybe the sticker can change. And they're not that expensive, and they can be very elegant looking. And I don't like Disneyland, I like subtlety, but enough to be there so the kids get it, and the kids really get excited about it. Kayla did a really nice sketch of how we would work on our forest floor. So after we have all these conversations about concept and everything like that, it ultimately comes down to, well, what are you going to put on the walls? What are you going to put on the ceilings? What are these, we have to buy products and we have to actually do things and tell contractors what to do. And so how do we do that? And her sketch here of, it's just the corridor floors, essentially, this is one of our learning step areas, and then this is the gateway into the classroom wing, happens to be the kindergarten wing in this particular case. And so we have a floor pattern that she's created that is as if you're along a park trail or a park path. We can have mushrooms and things like that and graphics on the floor, relatively repeatable and simple, but also elegant in a way. So we give us an interesting format. If you ever pay attention to the kids, are always looking down. I was always one of the kids that found the quarters when I was taking a walk or whatever. And my mother was like, "You walk off a cliff if you don't look up."
What kind of material would be on the floor for something like that? Is it carpet, tile, stained concrete?
A combination. So we would recommend some carpet, and we would recommend some hard surface, like an LVT or a marmoleum type of seamless product. I like the seamless product. It's a little bit easier to clean, and it's also super easy to cut shapes out, and it all gets chemically welded together. It's very, very nice and long-lasting. We also like a little bit of carpet so that we can change from going from hard surface to going to soft areas. It changes the acoustics. It also wakes kids up a little bit when you go from one place to the other. So where the walls tighten up in a corridor and there's lockers maybe on one or two sides in those areas, that's carpet. The ceiling comes down. It's hey, be a little bit quieter in this area. The carpet's telling you that. The pattern and everything can still continue to go through, so it can still be thematic. But there should be a rhyme or a reason as to why we're putting finishes one place versus another. And then there's cleanability conversations, of course, with all that. All of your elementary schools that we've been to have carpet throughout. And that was one of the things in our surveys with the teachers. They all chose carpet in their classroom, which I think is a really good solution. We didn't talk to them about what to do in the corridor, but I do think they're carpeted for a reason. Is so pleasurable and quiet when you're in those buildings. And so we have a big building with a lot of kids, and when they are coming up and down their hallways, one of the design features here is that we don't have second grade going through third grade. There's no reason for any grade level to go through another grade level. That's super important here. So they're almost dead-end corridors in a way. And so that minimizes the traffic. But there still will be, from one period to the other, kids coming and going to lunch and things like that. And so we want to be able to be careful about the acoustics. Some of the things Dan has incorporated into the design, you see a little bit of it on the outside of the building, coming into the inside of the building. We have some stone, targeted areas of stacked stone, similar to what you would see at a national park if you went. And then we always try to include some tile wainscoting in the building, especially in the areas that are high trafficked. Kids, if you ever notice, they're dragging their hands on the wall when they're walking and everything like that. We're bumping carts, all sorts of things like that. We want to give you a building that is going to stand the test of time. And so that's sort of the lower half of the wall. It's a darker, trying to get a little contrast in there. It's also maybe the lower portion of the forest, so to speak, so it's a little bit darker. On the right-hand side, other things as a part of the pathways and trails. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. A little bit of water in here and there. I like water's edge in this particular case. So we get a little bit of blue, a little bit of fun. And then we are looking at a sort of footpath, maybe crossing a stream sort of scenario. We see that all around. I walk my dog, and they have all sorts of those, just they're real low. And so we have representation of that. It actually isn't that. We also have that coming into the building when the kids are dropped off on the outside of the building, trying to integrate. And there's a mushroom picture at the bottom there. One of the big things about a good building, of course, is signage. And a lot of times I think architects, we just buy the usual signs and don't think about it as much, especially a secondary building. I think it's like, well, just solve the problem, get the thing up there and everything like that. But here, I think we've had so many discussions with the staff about how are the kids going to know where to go. We think we solved it partially with colors, but we also think that we can thematically solve it also with signage. Having nice big signs going into each one of the classroom neighborhoods, identifying what they are, if they're climbers, and having a nice big sign there. And also it gives us a chance, the national forests have this unique shape that we said, well, you know, we'd like to introduce a curve. Why don't we try to peel off that shape and put it into our design? And so you will see it in subtle ways. You'll see that shape maybe is, we have these little spots that are recessed where a student on their own could sit into the wall, but it would be shaped like that. It would be carpeted on the inside, and they could sit and read a book inside that space, sort of thing like that. Or a bulkhead where the dappled light is coming through, where it has a curve. There's a meaning to how that is arranged. And by the way, Dan has gone to the trouble of mathematically making it work so that it's actually a teachable moment too. And so you'll see a little bit of that creeping in as we start to define things. And then in the upper right, I love this whole format here of how are we using arrows? Are we doing common sense things that, you know, oftentimes really good airports do? Are we doing things that actually help the kids find their way around and without really thinking about it, you know? And once they do it a few times, I don't know if you've ever been to a place where typically if you ever go into like an airport or a mall or something like that, if you ever have noticed that most of the time the women's restrooms are on the right and the men's restrooms are on the left. And I always like to say, well, women are always right. But there's a reason for that. As designers, you're taught to try to do that so that from one building to the other, guys or girls don't accidentally just turn into the wrong restroom. But occasionally I find that it isn't done, the designers didn't think about it, and they got them mixed up. And what you find out is people don't read the signs, they just get used to turning right, kind of thing like that. And so part of the reason also is the sign is like this. It's this little tiny thing that says men with a little person's body in it, so it's like doesn't register if you're physically already, you know, feeling like you want to turn right instead of left. So how can we like overcome that a little bit? And so larger text, maybe some arrows, and then we'll key off of what the park theme would be when we do the signage. So here are a bunch of images after all that conversation. This is our lobby space. This is a taste of the building. Ultimately, we'll probably have a video to go through the whole building and everything like that, but this is a taste today. So we have a number of images that are focused around one of the classrooms, learning stairs and gateway entryways, which happens to be the second grade. And a little bit over here, this is the stream center. And this happens to be the cafeteria right here. We have 1 and 2 cafeterias. And so with this image that we're about to see, there's a little arrow here. So it's as if you came off the lobby and then you went into the pathway and you're staring at this learning stair here and then the stair that goes up and down. And so this is it. You can see our learning stairs. This is a teacher actually teaching. The teacher actually has a projected, a marker board that actually has a projected image on it. And then there's an LCD screen there. There's hookups and things like that, a place for a teacher to actually teach from this space. And then up here at the next level up, you could kind of see there's a little bit of curve here. It's a bulkhead. And there's a skylight up here. And these are the acoustical panels where we'll try to find a way to integrate them with the ceiling and get that dappled light effect. And in the background, you can see that we have the sun rays painted on the walls. And the other thing that you might notice on the floor is our little park path. Kayla's done a nice job of trying to lay something out that's nice and smooth, but not 100% directive. A little bit of water and a little bit of edges. And then a little bit of stone, stacked stone, you'll see in a few key areas. And then the thing that probably changes the image more than anything is the integration of trees indoors. There are choices. We are designing them to be able to be real, but they don't have to be real. They could be actual. There's trees that there's a place called Plantscapes that makes them look like you'd have to walk up and touch it to see if it's real. The trunks, I think, are maybe even real. I'm not sure. So there are choices. Either way, it's not too expensive, but we have there's 2 trees in this locale. And same thing on the other learning stair. The next image is the same space, but looking from the opposite direction. So still along the park pathway, looking back towards the learning stair as a featured space. And so here we are. The same teacher is on the right-hand side with the display and everything over there, and then another look at the learning stair. That learning stair, by the way, is easily made to fit 2 classes comfortably, probably enough to be able to fit 4. But for sure, we can get 2 classes teaming together on those stairs and have a nice presentation, whether it's a student-directed or just a teaming exercise. One of the things that Dan has created is we wanted to do our railings and things like that. This is the stair going to upstairs, and then around the corner goes downstairs. We wanted to create a scenario where we could have some transparency as you're going up and down the stairs, so there's a little bit of glass. It also gives us an opportunity to put the stickers on the glass so that you can see where we are in theme as you go through the building. But also, we wanted to integrate quite a bit of warmness and wood in. So instead of everything being glass, like I think most people would do, we mixed in wood panels. It's a little bit easier, less to clean, so the facilities will appreciate that. But that's what these pieces are. So there's a glass piece, and then these are wood pieces. Relatively simple railing system with standoffs, just to cut panels stuck right on there. Super simple. The next one is if you were standing on top of the learning stair looking towards the teaching wall. And so here we are up there. You can see one of the trees. The idea was to create sort of a picnic atmosphere where you're under the trees and you're sitting around and you're doing learning in the shade, so to speak. And here is the marker board that is being projected with an image that the teacher is teaching from, and then that was the LCD screen. Behind this set of doors is the K2 cafeteria. And just behind this opening is into the lobby. The next view is going a little bit, looking the opposite way, but again, down the pathway. We wanted to be able to see an entrance into the second grade wing. This space here is a resource room, and so it has a little bit of a special feature. It's in support of what's going on out here, but it also can be independent. From a teaching point of view. Let's take a quick look at that. So here you can see the moniker hikers going down the second grade. Here's a mushroom on the floor, a little bit of fun and some colors. This is that resource room. It has a view window. You can see the shape of the view window. And there's some interactive seating there. We're looking for some small places of contemplation and things like that, almost like if you were sitting on a log in the forest, sort of thing like that. Not hyper literal, but gives us a reason to do things sometimes. And then one of the things that we wanted to be able to show, this is one of the background murals with the trees. And so we're in the forest undergrowth, and then display. Lots of student display starting to come in. It's hard to show it all. There's some on the opposite wall over here. This would be tackboard display. We have a mixture of tackboard display and actual 3D display with adjustable shelving and things like that. If we go a little bit further down, we'll start to see some of that. This is the Stream Lab. And in the center is our Starry Night. And this is you can see that door right there, and this is a glass view. Administration wants to see the activities that are going on in the Stream Lab a little bit. We want to be transparent about what's going on, some of the fun educational things, progressive educational things that are going on. And then we want to show the outcomes of some of those projects, and what are those manipulatives, what do they turn into being. And so here's the classroom on the right. If you go through here, this is our Starry Night in this area. There's a display case on the right and a tackable surface on the left and a tackable surface on the right. Again, some signage. We look to make some of the signage a little bit more technical and interesting wherever we can integrate with Stream to have a little bit of fun. This is the footpath, the wooden footpath crossing the stream scenario right there, and it's just a floor graphic. And then if we get a little bit closer to the space, here you can see the lighted display, a little bit of museum quality, but definitely something special. We tone the lights down. We definitely like to go from the bigger space to the smaller space, change the color, make it a little bit more intimate, and then really try to highlight what's going on in student work here, almost like you would in a museum in a way. And this is 3 floors. So you get this on every floor. You could do it by, this could be 2nd and 3rd grade at this location, or it could be a whole, it could be an individual class, or it could be something that's rotating across the school, depending on what the theme is, or what the projects that are going on. So multiple opportunities like that across the school, as well as inside the classroom wings, which we'll have to wait till next year at our next meeting to show some of those things. Last 2 views. This is a staircase upstairs at this learning stair on the upper level, looking across here, just to get an idea, kind of if you were up looking down, what would be going on. We did, I think someone said, we don't want anybody falling off over the railings and everything. The railings are definitely high.
We prefer they don't.
Yeah. Yeah, me, I don't want any calls. And one of the things is that if you notice, we have some glass and some panels, and so we're saving a little bit of money by using wood instead of glass here and there, but we're sort of peekaboo opportunities as students are walking by. And you can see the acoustical panels where we'll be able to show that tree canopy up there, and again, ordinary materials, and then some display on the walls. And then where there isn't, we have a few opportunities where you have overlooks, just as if you would go to a park, national park, and you would stop and go to the overlook, and they always have the stacked stone and the wood rails kind of thing. We kind of picked up on that to overlook into the cafeteria. We have a few of those along the way. And then the next one would be, this one isn't done, but we wanted to show it just because it helps get a little bit of the integration between the two. We have glass in between the cafeteria and the other spaces, so we can control the sound, and we minimize sound from cafeteria going out into the learning stair areas and into classroom wings, certainly. I think they're far enough away, but we're thinking about the acoustics of the situation. And this view is if you're in the K2 cafeteria looking this direction, where they both combine in this area here. We have a special little spot in there. So this is the doorway. You can see the hikers back here, hikers entrance back here, where we had all those views, and the learning steps were around to the right. We're working on trying to develop some acoustical panels on the walls in this space. Here is an overlook from upstairs. This is another overlook from upstairs, and then more acoustical panels. And we have a small group seating area. What we're envisioning is that the cafeteria isn't just for meals, it's also for education when it's not being used as a cafeteria. And we have that ability in the mornings and in the afternoons, and so we'd like it to be used for educational purposes. So we have flexible space. We have small group area where we actually would have marker board and things like that on the wall, so you could actually pull out. The stream room is right through those doors on the other side of the hallway. They could come out from the stream lab and out into the cafeteria and have a large group experience, or even just a breakout, get dirty kind of a thing. And then around the corner to the left, you can't see that from here, we'll have a larger format where if you wanted to get a couple classes together or have an evening activity where PTA was making a presentation or something, it could also be in this space too. So we're thinking about being flexible in all the spaces. That was it for interior theme for today. Any comments before we move on to other things?
I'm just so thoroughly impressed with the level of depth that your team has thought about every single detail. I really appreciate everything that you did, and
Thank you.
I'm really excited for our children. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Coming together, it's a big deal for you. We understand.
I agree. It's absolutely fabulous, and I love that you have tied it into what we already teach in our natural physical sciences, and how everywhere in that building is going to be a learning opportunity, no matter what grade you're in, no matter what classroom you're in. You're walking around with your adults and you're learning about and seeing things that you're talking about in your classrooms, and it's just continuing through the whole building.
Thank
It's
you.
awesome.
I
And
was.
think it'll be an easy integration, because we haven't talked about the exterior space, but, you know, it's like a completely integrated interior, exterior space. There'll be lots of learning areas outside as well. I mean, I think that's really exciting.
I'm super excited about the
encourages-
outside.
You know, what we're doing is not going overboard on the technology, keeping kids in class in front of screens, or giving people, you know, encouraging students to get outside, you know, get closer to nature rather than closer to screens. I think that's good.
I hope the
Especially for
public
long-term.
appreciates, they probably don't during this process because it's hard to be here and absorb all the things, but what the administration is planning in the connections to the outside are simple things that just oftentimes just don't get thought of or whatever. We have a natural wetlands on the site, and so working with the PTA to try to put a picnic pavilion out there, and so we have an educational spot there that's easily accessible from the courtyard ecology area, where we'll have garden plantings and beds for the kids to be active in, and as well as a ecology zone right in the middle, right off of the Streamlabs. A paved outdoor patio area, uncovered for those kinds of activities, as well as one that's covered for, you know, questionable weather times. There's a lot of flexibility in what's going on. I think it isn't just thinking about, well, how can we squeeze all these rooms into a footprint? It's much more than that, I think. We're really excited about that. Just as designers and educational designers, I think so oftentimes we just don't get to do that kind of thing because nobody wants to take the time to think about it. But you, our administration team, are dogged. They're all over us. It's awesome.
Oh, since you were talking about the floor and the stream on the floor and all of those things, I just wanted to say that something the Strategic Planning Committee talked about a bit was the sensory pathway idea for kids who need to do the jumping jacks and then bounce and then touch the wall and count the bees or whatever. Not that that, of course, can be the entire floor, but just planting a seed.
Yeah, we even, today we had special education meeting with the teachers, and a lot of those rooms are located along the bridge area on the floor plan, because that's really good for staff, and it's a really nice spot, and we have some really unique rooms. But they have little tricycles and things like that are, you know, they use, and so we're integrating parking for them, and we actually have, that quarter is not really for students to walk back and forth because we don't really go from second grade to third grade. There isn't a mass of students. And so they actually have a run to be able to do those kinds of things, as well as we have parking on the ground floor so they could go outside on the patio and do that too. So a lot of fun, I think, and a lot of good educational opportunities that are outside the usual, because as we know, all of your buildings at this level, they were not designed for special education activities, frankly, when they were made. It isn't the fault of, it just didn't exist in public schools back when these buildings were done. And that's one of the reasons, I would say, why you're doing what you're doing, is it gives you the opportunity to equalize and to actually design appropriate as much as we possibly can. So trying to think about all that. It doesn't take much, it's just, hey, bike parking. Okay. Craig is on the phone. We have, I put the slide up here to remind us that we've got a little bit of site to talk about today. And Craig Bishop is your civil engineer, and he wanted to say a few things. Craig, are you there? I saw he was up there earlier. How do you know? There he is.
Greg, are you there? I can't hear him.
The person at the bottom is.
Craig, can you say so? Try to say something again. It's definitely on your end, Craig.
I can see he's unmuted.
Dan, this can give you a glimpse of what teaching in COVID.
Well, this is the same problem that I had just dealing with talking to staff. It was terrible.
He's going to try to log back in.
There's a phone number attached to the WebEx, maybe you can call that.
Dan's texting.
You can't, is this something you could jump on next week, or?
I think there's some pretty.
Jump to the traffic discussion first and then come back?
Yeah, I mean, if Darren could do that.
Hi, everyone. This is Darren. Can you hear me?
Yes, Darren,
Yes,
we can hear you.
I apologize on Craig's behalf.
Well, one of the things that we can talk about while they're getting themselves reorganized and checked in is that the first of the submittals to the municipality have gone in. Late last week, they were submitted for zoning approval. There were 2 items that were submitted: request for zoning variances on the height of the building and also on the site lighting and how much site lighting there would be in the design. There'll be a zoning hearing meeting in the early part of January, right after the new year. We'll be there, our design team, engineers will be there to take any questions from the zoning board and hopefully, let them see our excitement and emphasis on getting those approvals so we can keep working forward on the project, ultimately for a spring bidding time period. We're also putting the finishing touches, and I'm hoping Darren can speak to the traffic study, where we are with that piece, because he got some new data for us at the end of last week as well, beginning of this.
Sure, I could give you a brief summary on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
We've taken the data that you provided for the existing schools and compiled that with our Institute of Transportation Engineers data to try to portray the most accurate picture we can of what the school traffic will entail. And actually, that's some of that preliminary analysis or preliminary data is with Gateway Engineers right now being reviewed. But once we get their concurrence, we can go forward with the traffic study. So the traffic study is well in progress.
And Darren,
As far as the findings of that study, it's still preliminary at this point, but we're trying to provide the safest ingress and egress we can from King School Road as well as the local roadways while maintaining safety and capacity for the school users and the local residences.
and so what's your timeline then, Darren, when you think you'll be able to speak to the board at least on traffic issues and how things can be mitigated?
My hope is that we would have feedback from Gateway next week and probably turn the traffic study around within hopefully 2 to 3 weeks after that. And once we would get concurrence from the reviewer, we would know what the potential extent of any off-site improvements would be.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board, just where we are with the traffic study, what that might mean? Not a lot of answers yet, so I'm sorry to say. It's certainly something to be aware of, that it's in the works. And I know that there's a little anxiety from folks in the neighborhood that this is going to be properly addressed. And I think the municipality's expectation is that before we even submit, we have dotted our I's and crossed the T's so that we know exactly what would be necessary. I think one of the frustrations from our perspective is that the bulk of the traffic issues are about 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon. The rest of the time, there's almost no change to the traffic flow in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Did he get back on? Nice. Oh, there he is. Craig, are you working again? Is it working? Nice.
Craig, can you hear us?
What do you think, Darren? You think you can take it from here and cover the rest?
Can you tell him to call your phone and we'll put it by the speaker?
That's a good idea.
Craig, we're going to put you next to a microphone.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. What's going on my end?
Okay, right now on the screen, we have the outline that you provided.
Okay. So I heard Darren talking about the traffic stuff. Do you want me to circle back on the zoning? Or
Anything more we should say about that? I don't know. You probably were logged off when I was giving the board the heads up on the zoning hearing in January and what we're asking for.
Okay. All right. Then I guess move to the Planning Commission. And we're planning to submit and for March's Planning Commission meeting. Sorry, I have like an echo on my end. I'm trying to, there we go. All right. Yeah, so we're planning to submit that on February 6th. That will be our submission deadline for the March Planning Commission meeting. And we would be going to a workshop meeting then on February 22nd, just to talk with the Planning Commission and prep to the voting meeting that would happen on March 8th. And then we'll be anticipating, hopefully then going from that meeting on to council to seek approval. So we're looking at probably March, no later than April, of getting conditional approval for the land development and lot consolidation plan with Bethel Park. And then as far as the MPDS and ENS and our DEP permitting there, we are anticipating
could you tell us what those acronyms mean?
for those permits here this Friday. So it's probably about a 4-month approval time frame on that. So we should be getting that about the same time we'd be getting our conditional approval from Bethel Park.
Hey, Craig.
And yes.
Can you describe what the acronyms are, MPDES and so forth, for folks that don't understand those things?
Yeah, so the MPDS permit is a National Pollution Discharge Erosion and Sediment Control Permit. So that's just related to water quality that we're, with the new improvements, we need to treat the impervious areas and mitigate the pollutants and get that out of the water before discharging it to the stream. So that permit will take care of that, and then as well as the erosion and sediment control BMPs that would be up around the site for the grading, just to keep sediment from getting onto adjacent neighbors or down into the stream. And then actually, I did see the general permit there. We do have a little bit of a stream that goes up to the site that we will be crossing, and we'll need a GP7 for that, but that's will all be tied with this other MPDS permit that will be submitted on Friday. And then moving on there to the sewage planning, we were able to talk with DEP and get the authority on board to agree to a 6.4 gallons per day, and that was just taken from the water bill records for the existing elementary schools, and then basically took the average, the highest average, daily average, and it came out to about 6.4. So we were able to get both DEP and the sewer authority to agree on that flow data. And so now the next step for that is the authority is requesting to do a conveyance analysis on the existing system to the south along kind of as Boyer, Murray, and McPherson, that neighborhood is kind of where the existing sewer is flowing. And in order for us to be able to tie into that, they just want to make sure that they have capacity in that system for us to tie into that. So I know Dr. Walsh, I'm not sure if that was on the agenda or not, but I know Wade Trim, the authority's engineer, provided a document of a additional fee for them to do that assessment. And fingers crossed that we have capacity and we can do gravity fed down into that system. The alternate, if that is not the case, would be to do a pump station, and would have to pump it up to King School and tie into that sewer conveyance system.
Yeah, you could tell them that there is a motion for that tonight.
There is actually a motion for that tonight, Craig.
Perfect. Okay. So I think that was all I had as far as updates. I don't know if there was any other questions.
I had the chart up here. Did you need to look at the chart or talk about the chart at all?
Hang on a second. I have a hard time seeing the chart. Let me change my
one
view.
question while he's looking through the chart. You know, there's a lot of approvals here and permits and things like that. Are there any risks we should be aware of? Or you know, is the process pretty straightforward and a high likelihood that everything will be approved?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, the question is, are there any risks involved in the process? Is there a high likelihood that things will get approved? Is this normal for doing a project?
Yeah, I guess that.
Yeah, so we have to do a sewage planning module for every project, just to make sure that the authorities, they have the capacity. And sometimes we do run into issues where the authorities don't have necessarily the capacity, so we kind of have to run through the process we're running through on this project, just to make sure that this new development isn't going to cause any issues to further downstream. And I guess, yeah, Dan, to that chart that you did have, we kind of started to outline scheduling, if the different routes, if this had to take, and potential costs involved. Now, those are just all kind of speculative costs. We won't be able to kind of fine tune those until Waytrim does their analysis and we know what the design is and which direction we're taking. But we just kind of wanted to get this out in front of you guys so you could kind of see what the process is for each one of these steps and the potential cost impacts.
Any other questions for Sybil?
I guess the question for you, Dan, is that the sewage planning module, for instance, we're looking for approvals September, October, and November, depending on what we need approved. But are we already moving dirt at that point?
Are we, I'm sorry?
I said, aren't we already moving dirt at that point?
It is possible. Yeah. Craig, did you hear that?
Yeah, I did hear that. So I did talk with Bethel Park, it was Friday when we dropped off our the variance submission, and was talking with the zoning officer and the planner over there, just because I did have concerns about that. But they said that as long as we have a plan in place, as far as knowing what our plan is, that they would work with us, and potentially we could probably get a grading permit to go ahead and start moving the dirt and begin construction, just knowing that permit is still outstanding, just as long as we had a path moving forward of what the design is and what the plan is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hanging up now. It is a complicated process. Every time we do a new building, it's complicated, though. And I will say that the municipality's been very helpful. Their engineers are very helpful. It's a team thing. From what I can see, the municipality doesn't want the school district to spend more than they need to spend, but they also want to protect their adjacent properties and folks that live nearby and downstream and things like that. And I think also for folks who don't understand the process too of doing a new building, we talked about, Craig mentioned MPDES. That's all about water that is flowing off of your site onto potentially other properties or into the system. And the essential law basically is that you cannot increase, based on your development, if you're going to do a development, you cannot increase the flow off of the site. And actually you have to reduce the flow off of the site. And it's an unbelievable amount of measures that are done now when we build a building to help the community essentially reduce the pressure in the piping system. Stormwater, Pittsburgh has lots of flooding problems. And so every time a project is done, I think it helps that situation. And silt buildup and all those kinds of things that could really harm, I think, over time. So they work really hard, I think, to try to help in that situation. And so anybody that's listening, I think if you did live nearby, the project actually will help. It will correct any current situation that might exist, potentially, if it is water flowing off of your property down at that basin and things like that. Right now, that whole thing has to be restructured. And so it should be helpful. And that's, I think, the municipalities are real helpful and careful about that. Okay. The last thing that we really wanted to touch on today was a conversation about the small gym. So we have two gymnasium or PE spaces, I'll say, in the building. One is a full-size gym, which is this space over here on the right. We kind of call it the 3-5 gym. And the PE teachers call the other gym the slim gym. That's what they've been calling it. And the other gym is on the ground floor, right here, on the other side of the building. So if I go back real quick, the 3-5 gym for PE is up here, and it also is adjacent to the outdoor area that is from the 3-5 cafeteria, is used for the 3-5 cafeteria. And then when we go to the ground floor, the slim gym is on the ground floor with the kindergarten and first grade, and their play area is adjacent also. So one of the things about the stacking of the building, of course, we're trying to be as what would you call it, condensed as possible, because the site is challenging. And as a part of the programming, it was determined that this gym would be focused on kindergarten and first grade, and possibly some second grade. But scheduling has proved out that the upper gym can handle the second grade also, if need be, in scheduling. We really only need kindergarten and first grade currently right now in the schedule inside this space. And so this space becomes an alternative space from the typical gym. We rarely get to design a gym that is just for really small people, for the most part. And so there's some fun going on there and working with the teachers to be able to do that. But it is not a traditional educational PE space that would be used in the evenings for basketball or community events. And the question has come up that, well, we're closing a number of schools potentially to build this building, and they have those, the community uses those facilities in the evening, and so this might work for PE in the building, but what does it do for us as a community after school, after hours? And is there a way to actually turn this gym into a big regular gym, like the one upstairs? And the first answer is we don't really have room on the site to build a separate gym, another gym. We're already more than our square footage allocated originally when we started the programming, and so there's also that cost challenge too. And so at our office, we said, well, okay, is there a creative way to solve this problem? And could we do something a little bit different? And so we came upstairs, oops, I'll go backwards, and we looked at the large group instruction. Now, the large group instruction is somewhat of an auditorium. It is a flat floor. It has telescopic seating, which are cushy chairs like this, but they go back and forth like a bleacher. It's basically a bleacher set with nicer chairs on it. So you can have an auditorium type setting. The floor is flat. This area that you see here is the stage area, which is essentially, this is a music space. And so it's designed to have ensembles come together inside this space, have parent community performances in this space. It's also designed to have 2 grade levels, so like second and third grade could come in here and have a presentation together. There's enough seats for all of them to be together during the day. So there's 600 plus seats. And the space is, again, music related, but it has the flexibility to be able to move the seats back and have an open floor and do something different, have an art show, have a book fair, do all sorts of other things during the day, because we don't need it for ensemble every period of the day. Probably 2 periods a day, I think. We're not 100% sure on the schedule yet, but that's what we're thinking. I think I'm right about that. For right now, preliminarily. At least 2 periods for ensemble, unless we figure something different out as we go forward. So we said, well, if we had to do it, could we do it in that space? What would have to change to make that space into a gym? And, would it compromise the music program? Could it fit? How much additional square footage would have to be added to the building, or would there need to be? And so we did a little bit of a sketch. Get to here. So here's the space closer up. And again, we're talking essentially this space right here. And so here is a superimposed sketch of the gymnasium. If we were to put a gymnasium here, you can see this is the gym proper. The telescopic seatings would be stored over here and then come out to about here, just as they did on below. You can kind of see the shadow of what was below, because this is superimposed over the top of the large group instruction plan. But the size of a gymnasium is a lot bigger than the large group instruction in footprint. And so the stage platform area or ensemble area would have to be pushed back to be able to make enough room to be able to get a basketball court in there if we're trying to get a full-size scenario, generally matching a regular size court. And you can see here's the current line of our building now, and we add somewhere between 2,100 and 2,400 square feet. I measured it today based on the design. It was 2,108 square feet, but that was a pencil sketch. Once we get in the computer, it'll be somewhere between that and 2,400 in that range. So we would have to add square footage to the building, which is at, let's just say $250 a square foot plus 20% project cost. We're probably looking in the neighborhood of $600,000 to make this change. One of the things I would say that I don't like about it is a gymatorium, is what I would call this, becomes sometimes not so good for either scenario, but definitely not good for music, and that's the challenge. We can't really do the acoustical treatments and things in the ceiling because the kids throwing the balls and kicking, it just destroys that up there. And we've tried it so many different ways and been relatively unsuccessful. And so I think that's a compromise. The other challenge would be moving PE up into the space now becomes a scheduling problem. If we're now needing the room for an ensemble during the day, but also PE is trying to use the space, who takes precedent? How do we do that? And then I would probably, it certainly, if the board says do it, we'll do our best, with floor surfaces. I wouldn't recommend wood. I'd probably just do a multi-purpose type floor that we can roll out the bleachers onto without damaging it, but also makes it good acoustically. We really don't want a wood floor. It's noisy walking on and everything, and especially from a music point of view, a presentation. Anyway, I think that was it in a nutshell. This is it if it was fully accomplished in rough form. Once Dan and Cassie get after to fine tune and everything, and then we'd have to talk to the teachers. We'll lose some small spaces in doing it to make things work.
Under the original design, let's just test it against some scenarios. So let's say it's raining outside, okay, and there's no outdoor recess.
Mm-hmm.
With the original design, is there enough space for kids to be in the gym, LGI room, things like that, so they're not confined to their classroom during lunchtime?
Yes. We've worked out, other than the fact that when an ensemble would need the space, you certainly couldn't do it during those times. But the seats do go all the way back against the wall. So I generally would probably say leave the seats back against the wall until you're going to have an audience necessary event, so you have the room flexible for you. And music can spill out and do whatever they want into that space on any given period or day, but also you could come in and you could have a music or a recess inside that space. Other districts that we've done this at, Blackhawk, Pine Richland, Quaker Valley, same kind of space. We see that kind of all sorts of activities happening inside there.
So when do you need to know from us if we want to go for the extra space or not. The reason why I ask is that we're also getting ready to put together a committee made up of a number of people from the community to focus on what do we do with the existing facilities that we have that may have an impact on some of the decision.
Right. If Cassie were here, she'd say yesterday.
Okay.
And honestly, our one of our biggest problems is we've already got steel designed. We
Yeah.
have structural engineers have been working. We have a preliminary mechanical engineering solutions, and so we're going to go backwards. So the sooner the better for you, because I can only make everyone go so fast.
I don't know about the rest of the board, but I appreciate you looking at this option, but what you said at the end kind of means the most to me, that you may have an area that you can do a lot of things, but it's not good for anything.
Right.
Or it doesn't get to be perfect for the either one. You know, so one of the challenges of the hybrid spaces.
I'm going to build off of what Mr. Christensen said, because the conversation started when my third grader came to me about a week ago as we were walking out the door to go to school and goes, "It's raining." And I was like, okay, what does that mean? It's raining. And it was like this downtrodden, face and everything else. I have to be in my classroom for recess. And I was like, there is the opportunity. We are building a school that is not built in the 1940s or the 1950s like all of our other classrooms. The opportunity to have academics in the classroom and recess, no matter, we live in Western Pennsylvania, it rains every third day. Rain, snow, I don't care what it is, but the opportunity to use that LGI room. So the other thing I'm going to do is encourage administration to figure out how the LGI room is open for all recess and find those STEAM rooms that is open for all recess. Because that's an opportunity for these kids. But I can just, the downtrodden of his voice, his face, his whole thing of, I have to be in my classroom for recess. That classroom should be used for academics, not for recess.
Well, you bring that up. You saw images of Learning Stair today. We have multiples of those in the building, and so that's a great spot for a recess kind of scenario. Obviously, it's not running around or anything like that, but it's a different forum, and it's a freedom, and there's exploration and things like that, and it's a different kind of place. So you can add those kinds of things. The covered area at the bridge could also be a recess area. So that's one of the challenges, I think, is coming up with a plan when you do have bad weather, and to how to divide and conquer a little bit. And maybe 3-5 is using this space, and K2 is using this space because it's raining today. Or maybe there's 4 spaces and they're spread out a little bit. So I think you have some flexibility that we normally don't get to have in most buildings.
And that's, I think, piqued the conversations of what can we do with the LGI room, what can we do with the STEAM rooms, how do we keep them out of the academic classroom for recess?
The problem with the stream rooms, it's not really a problem, but we have 2 of them in the main core of the building, and then this you can see right here. So that is a double room. It fits 2 classes inside that room. But that will be scheduled as a scheduled special most of the day. And the same with the other one that's on the ground floor also. But we have one inside the library that is a schedulable space, but it is an open space. It is not at least right now, I don't believe it's on the schedule. It's supposed to be an available space for teachers to be able to.
Dan, that wasn't as much to you, it was to the administration all sitting here tonight
Sorry.
saying, please, 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 as you look at this, let's take this opportunity so that no kids need to say again that my recess was in my academic classroom. Because I think what you showed us tonight is an availability for us to take in the next step and be that classroom at 2040 and say, here's how you do it. So that was my challenge as a board director to administration, that can't happen. I can't, I'm not sure mine will see this building, but I can't, in that face I'm gonna have to deal with for the next 2 years of it's recess and I'm in my classroom.
Dan, let me ask you a question. With this this new option, you're not getting rid of the Slim Jim, right? The Slim Jim's still going to be in place?
Currently, right now, in this option, I was kind of thinking that you might want to keep the Slim Jim, but it
Right,
is
so-
an option to eliminate the Slim Jim. Obviously, it's your choice. You could,
I thought we were keeping the Slim Jim with this option.
I think that was the conversation, yeah. And so
'Cause
right
you still have
now,
to schedule.
I'm saying leave it the way it is.
Yeah, okay.
And I mean, part of
That's
the
another
reason
space.
this space isn't really appropriate for kindergarten and first grade for the kinds of things that PE is trying to do with them. It's different. You know, we're all used to the fact that kindergarten and first grade uses a basketball arena essentially every single time they go into the gym, but that's just because it's there and it's a across the spectrum type of space. It's supposed to generally be there for everybody to use, but it actually doesn't. It works fine for kids to run around and everything, but there's so much more going on in a space that's designed specifically for those tiniest, the primary of kids, and to give them the opportunity, scooters and little traversing walls that are set up for them, and little racetracks and all sorts of things like that. It's a whole different set of games and everything like that. That's really just walking around. You know, for us, it would be like walking around, but for them, it's like speeding around, and there's no need to have a 30-foot high space for that kind of thing. So, and in their space, their plan projecting things on the floor, there's different kinds of things like that. We can do that because it's not going to get broken so easily. And having interactive boards on the walls and things like that. There's so much going on with movement and dance and yoga. It sounds funny, but it actually, you know, it's sized for them. So it's just kind of interesting, different.
Any other comments, questions, preferences? No?
Sorry to keep you so long.
It's good stuff. Yeah, thank you.
Lots to talk about. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Draw. Next is discussion items, scheduling community meetings. Dr. Walsh?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Modrak. So the board, to be aware that the municipality had asked for us to host community meetings relative to the plans before the Planning Commission meets publicly to entertain the plans. So you just saw from Mr. Engen's timeline there on the last page of his handout that we're talking March roughly for Planning Commission approval, submission in February. So I'm asking for the board to identify a date or two by which we could have community meetings for the folks to see these plans, as much detail as we can offer them. We saw a lot more tonight than we've seen in a while and continue to refine those drawings. And I'm thinking by early January or mid-January, we should be able to give them a lot of meat on that bone for folks with kids coming or without to learn about the project and what they could expect and share any concerns with us prior to us submitting to the municipality.
So tonight, we just approved our board meeting schedule. Can we just take two of the facilities meetings that we've identified and maybe move them to
Yeah,
another
that's perfect.
location or something? And then we don't have to add another one, and plus we'd be talking about facilities anyway.
Yeah. So January 10th is the first of the new year. That's a facilities meeting. It would be the second Tuesday of that month. That's a perfect, we can schedule one maybe over at NAMS. So we'll be on the site, and then that would be more conducive or local for folks in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Sounds
Does
great.
that sound okay to everybody?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. For sure. And just to clarify, Mr. McCausland, we would advertise those, we typically advertise those as voting meetings anyway, right? The facilities committee meetings?
We'll advertise all the meetings at one time, so we'll just put a caveat in there that that meeting will be at NAMS.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll work on Mr. Cromie on the messaging that. Yep, thank you.
Okay, that being said, our third item, naming of the new K-5 elementary project. Excuse me. It's the Board of Directors is asked to approve administration's recommendation to approve the name of the K-5 elementary project officially as the Bethel Park Elementary School. So any thoughts or comments from the board?
I brought this up to the board a month or so ago about trying to get some feedback on it because they're starting to draw some specifics, even putting lettering on the side of a building, or we're getting to that point. And this was the one that seemed to get the most interest from the members of the board. And we said at that point, let's leave it open for a month and hear what we hear from community members. And this was the only one that I didn't hear anything myself, but the feedback I heard is this one makes the most sense because it represents, the consolidation of Bethel Park's elementary schools. And keeping the word park, I think, is what Dan would love for us to do, is somehow or other keep. Yeah.
If you're going to be the James Walsh Elementary School, then we have to have it an Irish theme, right?
Yeah, so we would.
Can you do leprechauns?
Leprechauns and clover.
Please no.
Work for Andy.
Yeah.
I take it that sounds like unanimous then, right?
Yeah. Do we need to vote on that officially, or was this on as an item to vote on?
I think it was a motion.
It's an item to vote on, yeah.
Yeah, to approve our recommendation to name the building Bethel Park Elementary School.
Well, then I'll second if Mr. Mojarek moved it.
That was a motion. Ms. Turner's going to second it.
All right, Mr. McCausland.
Voting is open. Motion carries.
Okay, that's what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm all done.
Okay, next item on the agenda, Mr. Grisbeck, can you take care of the 5 or so items on the finance, 6 items on the finance committee?
Yes, I can. We have 6 items tonight under the Finance Committee agenda. Number 1, approval of lease agreement. The Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve a lease agreement with the Wilson Group for print management services in the amount of $10,199.99 for a term of 63 months. This lease carries unlimited printing for both black and white and color prints, removal and replacement of all existing equipment within 4 weeks, ability to negotiate terms after building consolidation, and a donation in the form of a $2,000 annual student scholarship. Item number 2, payment for the new K-5 elementary school project. The Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve payment for invoice number 165453 to Herbert Rowland and Grubick, Inc. in the amount of $17,154.42 for survey, environmental, and permitting services related to the new K-5 elementary school project, and that is HRG that you've heard us mention before. Item number 3 is the approval of reimbursement agreement. The Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve a reimbursement agreement between the Bethel Park School District and the Bethel Park Municipal Authority for a sewage facility planning module for the new K-5 elementary school project. Item number 4, approval of agreement for construction management services. The Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve an agreement with Macero Corporation for construction management services for the new K-5 elementary project, pending finalization and solicitor approval. Item number 5, payment for the bus garage renovation project. The Board of School Directors approves the administration's recommendation to approve payment for project number 22-TAC-25023, application 3 for $142,402.23 to A. Felino Construction, Inc. for the bus garage renovation project. The funds will be paid from Fund 32 bus paving project. And then finally, item number 6 is just for information. Mr. McCausland will be discussing our financial report. Does anyone have any questions or want anything from any of the items 1 through 5 held out to vote separately?
Yes, I'd like to see item number 1, please.
Okay.
I have a question on item number 5.
Okay, do we just want to take them one by one then in that case? Okay. So for item number 1, I move to approve approval of lease agreement.
Second.
Motion
And
was
then
made
Mr.
by
Modrack.
Mr. Grisbeck, second by Ms. Janusik.
Did you have any discussion on that, Mr. Modrack?
Yes, some questions regards to this bid. If it's possible, administration can discuss the choosing of this bid over how many other competitors or vendors that bid. What's the status of the machines we already have in place? their future use, since I believe we are the owners of those property. And the aspect of the copying it says unlimited printing, as compared to what we're using now. So I don't know if Mr. McCausland would be able to help us out.
We received 3 different bids from your current vendor, Amcom, Toshiba, and the Wilson Group. Of those bids, we analyzed them based on the machines they were going to replace. Your current machines you purchased outright almost 6 years ago, so they're really at the end of their life cycle. There's even though some of the smaller printers probably weren't utilized as much as they possibly could have because of the COVID, these machines are really at the end of their life cycle and need to be replaced. We are not proposing to pay for these outright. We would lease them over a 5-year period. We had asked the 3 companies whether they would be willing to renegotiate that lease in 3 years because we potentially won't need as many machines if we consolidate buildings. Wilson Group, Amcom was willing to negotiate, but there were some limits around the negotiation, limiting us to just a 10% adjustment on machines, where Wilson Group was willing to renegotiate the complete terms of that agreement. Also under that agreement, when you look at not just the lease payment amount, but you factor in the overage cost for when printing exceeds the limits that have been established. The Wilson Group provides unlimited printing, so you won't experience any overage costs with that company at all. So when you factor those amounts in, they come in the lowest of the 3 bids that were presented.
Just follow-up question. I take it in the present contract we have now, we've experienced over printing costs then based on our...
We've had overage every year, somewhere around $20,000 to $30,000.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, and the last thing I will tell you is that the lead time to get new machines with the other 2 firms was about 12 weeks. Wilson Group can provide them in 3 to 4 weeks.
Does anyone have any other questions on this item?
Voting is open. Motion carries.
I move to approve item number 2, payment for the new K-5 elementary school project.
Second.
Anyone have any questions on this item?
Voting is open. Motion carries.
I move to approve item number 3, approval of reimbursement agreement.
I second.
This was the one that you heard Craig talking about earlier, where we would reimburse the municipality for the flow testing that's expected before we submit.
Thank you.
Voting is open. Motion carries.
I move to approve item number 4, approval of agreement for construction management services.
I second.
Dr. Walsh, would you like to talk about just really briefly how we came to this decision, or how the administration came to this decision?
Yes, so we received, we sent out, I think, 9 different requests for proposals from construction management firms, received bids from 5 of them, thank you, and reviewed them internally, evaluating the differences and the opportunities we would have with each of them, and then we brought in 3 of the 5 to meet with their team. interviewed. Mr. Engen participated in those interviews as well from an architect's perspective, and found that Macero's plans and skills and experience with Bethel Park was our preferred provider for this construction management firm. They would be the ones that would be on site. This firm would represent the district on site during the entire construction project. They would start theoretically tomorrow, meeting with Draw Collective to get the designs and then provide a cost estimate for each different phase of the design process, guide us through the bidding all the way through construction, and finally closing out punch lists, et cetera. One of the things that was really appealing about the Macero proposal was 2 professionals on site each day, and they would maintain the construction trailers themselves and have all the contractors sharing that space rather than each having separate trailers around the project. We like the idea of everybody being in the same office space, sharing the same wall calendar and the design work, et cetera. So we feel really good about this opportunity for taking this project to a successful conclusion.
Thank you very much for the explanation.
So they'll be serving the similar role to what SiteLogic does
Yes.
in the IMS
Yes,
project.
correct.
Voting is open. Motion carries.
And then the last voting item tonight under Finance Committee, number 5, payment for bus garage renovation project. I move to approve that item.
And
Second.
I think we'll ask Dr. Gensani to give a quick update because there's been a lot of activity
Sure.
this week.
Dr. Walsh, be glad to give you an update. So we have really good news. There's light at the end of the tunnel. We've been, down this path for, as you know, since beginning of really the start prior to school's beginning. All the underground work was done and ready to go, and we ran into a little bit of weather issues. But yesterday, we laid down our binder, our paving binder, which is the first layer. They worked, Felino worked last night till 7 at night to get a large chunk done. Today, they put the rest on, so we have our binder down. This week, tomorrow and Thursday, they will put the second layer, the final coating on, and we'll be ready to go. But of course, we just have to spray lines, and we need some nice weather to spray the lines down. The buses will be able to be moved over. There'll be some other work that'll be completed. However, the buses will be able to arrive over there, which is outside fencing, some of the warming stations. The bollards are all in, but those warming stations need to be put in along with the wire, needs to be pulled through the conduit. But once again, by the end of this week, we'll be all paved up and finally ready to go. We're excited about that.
Thank you.
We're not seeing any bumps in the road with this, with the weather today and tomorrow.
No. You'll probably say to yourself, how did they pave today while it was raining and misty? Well, actually, as long as it's not raining hard, when they use the roller, there's actually water on the roller, so that kind of facilitates that piece. So, no, we don't anticipate any problems. Yeah, the weather
And then-
forecast looks great. It's above 40 degrees, which it needs to be, and that's really more of an issue than the rain or the mist that we had today.
So anticipating the buses will be moved back in
As soon as
the 23rd?
Soon as we spray the spaces. So we have to put lineage down. We have to put the lines down.
There's no wait time on the asphalt that they can't go on to? So.
They're driving on it right now. They're driving on the binder. They've been filling up the buses. So, yeah, they can drive on. About an hour after, which is wonderful. It's not like concrete where you got to wait, 20 days or so. They can ride on the asphalt an hour after it's put down, currently with the weather that we have. If it was real hot in the middle of the summer, it'd be a little bit longer. But right now, hour, and we're driving on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Voting is open. Motion carries.
All right, item number 6, Mr. McCausland, would you like to give your financial report on Fund 31 and Fund 32?
Unless you have specific questions right now, we're still on budget. We're still, the biggest thing with the IMS project is waiting to find out what the numbers for Phase 2 are going to be. Right now, with the original numbers, we were about 6 or 7 million higher than we should have been. They have worked with the architectural firm to reduce some of the scope of the project. And as I know it, I'm not in all those meetings, but I believe SiteLogic is back repricing and getting quotes based on that revised scope. So once we have that, we'll have a better idea of where we are and whether we're going to need a Phase 3 for IMS or where we'll be based on where we're going with the new upper elementary. So there's a lot of moving parts, but that's in the works. Otherwise, both projects are on schedule. We'll probably be looking to do the bond issue for the new elementary sometime in the spring. Right now, the market's not great, but I've been staying in touch with the people at PNC Capital Markets to be ready. We're prepping the preliminary work so that we can go to market when the market is suitable or best for us. So all of that's working behind the scenes. I don't know that there's anything highly unusual in the reports. It's pretty much the standard information, but if you see something you have a question about, I'd be happy to answer it.
No, it all looked pretty straightforward. No specific questions for me.
I'm sorry?
It all looked pretty straightforward. No specific questions for me.
Mhm.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Public comments on anything related to school business? No call-ins?
No call-ins.
Nobody in the room? No? Board comments?
I just want to say thank you so much to the IMS team who did a fantastic production of Rudolph Jr. last week. It was fabulous. So congratulations to the directors and the staff who helped and the crew and the cast. It was a lot of fun, and I think a lot of us were there. We had fun in the audience too. It was very, very nice, and it's always a good job. So thank you so much, IMS. And if you missed it this year, better catch one next year.
Any other comments? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second?
Aye.
Oh, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.